Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the FPL podcast by Fantasy Football Hub. We will be looking ahead to Gameweek 33 plus and beyond. My name is Andrew Ferguson. I'm joined as usual by two of the best FPL managers in the game. Firstly, Andy Green. Andy, did you go ahead with your Aubameyang captaincy after?
Yep, I think, as I said, now is the time to start having some fun and taking some riskier decisions than I would have done during the regular season.
Fantastic. Good stuff. We also have Adam Hopcroft. Adam, are Villa looking in real danger of the drop now, or do you think they can salvage it?
I think they've struggled to stay up now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I can't see it happening.
What's it got to Grealish out of interest?
It's going to score the last goal in the last minute of the game and keep them up.
Wow, hopefully. I think there's a lot of talk about him going to Man City now. I've heard from a lot of sources that he's sold his house. He's on his way. So I think it'll be hopefully he'll sign off in style, but it's not looking that way at the moment, unfortunately.
Sad times for Villa fans. Okay, so with the FPL deadline back to normal for this week, we thought we would take a bit of a breather and a step back and look to assess the bigger picture for the final 6 fixtures of the season, including the best options for the run-in. Where are those fixture swings to find the best time to get those key players in? We will also look ahead at the best options for when to use any remaining chips and look to answer the raft of community questions we have had in. So for our YouTube watchers, if you haven't subscribed to us yet, please press the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen to ensure you don't miss anything. Also, please press the like button if you enjoy our content. So we are going to do something a little unusual today, as we feel like our chat around the final 6 game weeks will likely answer a lot of the questions we have had. So we're going to go through some of the questions first that we think we're going to answer during the podcast. So firstly, question from @AddieK2187. Which Man City assets to own going forward? Great question. Question off FPL Eulogy. Who would be your picks for a wildcard draft this game week and bench boost next game week? Question from @Mike108UK. What are your thoughts on Liverpool assets? Do you think the main lads will play? And how much does the motivation of a player, for example, the Golden Boot and the team, outweigh the normal form and fixture debate? That's a really good question. Question from @DomFPL. Is Man United attacking trio of Rashford, Martial and Fernandes a valid strategy for the next 3 game weeks against 3 relegation-threatened teams? And finally, question off Mark @MBison22. With game weeks fast running out, should we chuck the concept of patience out of the window and be ruthless in terms of giving players a chance to perform? What is the best way to exploit Man City's excellent fixtures? Do we triple up or avoid due to mass rotation? So some really good questions there, and we feel like hopefully we'll answer the majority of them in the chat coming up. So firstly then, Adam, if I can come to you first. For our YouTube watchers, I've just got the Hub's fixture ticker up on the screen. Which teams and potentially players are standing out for you for the remainder of the season?
I think let's start with Man City, because I think it was one of the questions that came in there. So I think City stand out. The challenge with City, as always, is going to be the rotation. So in terms of which ones do you pick, it's always going to be very, very difficult. If it was down to me in terms of having 3, I quite like Mahrez, Sterling and De Bruyne. They would be the ones. I think Foden is excellent value as well. The player I'd steer away from is Gabriel Jesus. Not a fan. He fails the eye test every time I watch him. I think in both the double game week and anyone that watched the game yesterday, he's not like Aguero. I'll put it this way: I wouldn't need a sofa if I was watching Man City and didn't have Jesus.
He doesn't seem to get those clear-cut chances, does he? Even where the keeper makes an incredible save or he smashes the crossbar, he just barely gets a chance at the moment.
I mean, he is up there for big chances missed this season, but he's scored very, very few. I think he's got 7 in 25. Yeah. I might be slightly off with the figures there in terms of what he scored. What I think he does do, though, is I think he can make Sterling a better option. And I thought Sterling was exceptional yesterday, and it was it was a joy to watch, and he looked very, very dangerous, as was Mahrez. So I think City are looking quite good. I think if you haven't got triple United, I think the fixtures are excellent. I think Ollie will play his main people consistently. I believe that. I think you've seen that he gave Bruno Fernandes 120 minutes because he wants to do well in all the competitions. So I think a United triple up is viable, whether it's one defence and two attackers or three attackers. I think equally, I think, whatever your strategy is, I think that either could work. Other teams that I'd look at, I think I've almost broken it into the next three games and the final three games.
Yeah.
So I think the Man City, the United triple ups are, a good short term. I think Chelsea got some good fixtures. Pulisic, I put in my wild card team. I think I've seen a few people mention Alonso and Azpilicueta. I think going big at the back could be a viable strategy because there's a lot of clean sheets at the moment, and I think that'll continue. I think particularly for the better teams. I think a couple of other players to mention for the last 3 game weeks. I think Everton's fixtures turn, and so do Southampton. So Ings and Calvert-Lewin potentially for the end of the season. So they're probably the main ones that I'm looking at the moment.
Great
yeah,
stuff.
I mean it's a familiar picture in terms of who you look at. You've got in that table there. You've got that Man City have the kind of the best attack rating fixtures. And I noticed that Chelsea's fairly high up the table there as well, and obviously Man United are second. But I was doing some analysis on that on the Opta tool, the Hub Opta tool, and I was quite surprised by this. But per appearance, i.e., per the team playing as a whole, Chelsea actually come up ahead of Man City in terms of XG and shots on target actually, and big chances. So obviously we've got a small sample size here. Chelsea have only played 2 games. But they've had 4 big chances, 17 shots, an XG of 2.76. Now, the problem with Chelsea is, particularly as Pulisic may or may not be injured, who's going to play up top? I was a bit surprised to see Tammy Abraham not start one of those 2 league games. And, of course, Pulisic. I mean, they've just got so many options now with Loftus-Cheek back as well. Callum
Did you see Abraham missed 3 big chances against City?
I did
and he only played, half an hour or however long he was on. But
yeah, it's just one of these teams I think that people kind of stay away from, possibly other than Pulisic, just because they're concerned, as am I, about rotation. But this is the point in the season where, as I said, you can look, depending what you're chasing, you can look to kind of bring in some of those assets that might be slightly riskier.
I think the defenders have got quite a high ceiling. I think with like Alonso and Azpilicueta got 2 assists against Villa, so I think they could be a good place.
Reece James could come in as well, so it's just a bit risky for Alonso because then Azpi could switch over. But with regards to Man City, I mean, so disappointed with Jesus last night. Yeah, the FA Cup game, absolutely dreadful. I was, he was one of the sort of players I was eyeing up for. We talked about it last week.
Yeah.
Does not pass the eye test, but stats wise kills it. And I mean, I just don't think. I think I have to kind of wipe him out unless he plays really well against Liverpool and gets some clear cut chances. He just never seems to be so. He's like the opposite of Aguero, where he's less direct, so he's constantly heading out to the wing, and then that's when Sterling gets the space through the middle. So potentially for assists, but that's not why you have him in your team. And he's just not as clinical, it seems, as Aguero. Obviously it's a hard comparison to make, one of the most clinical finishes in world football, but how many shots did he have? And you're just thinking, this is just never going to go in. Whereas when Aguero has a shot, from the 18, in between the 6 and 18-yard box, you think it's going in. So I agree. I think Jesus is probably the one out the window. The other one I'd obviously consider is Foden. He's on the pitch for 20 minutes, got an assist, and looked like he could have scored and got another assist. So he's a cheap option to that space. But the one player that probably is on a few people's radar, but the fixture is not exactly great, and the stats don't really back up for the moment, other than maybe the last game. I'm going to watch Harry Kane very closely because the last game he was playing almost like the old Harry Kane with a little bit less pace. Now, whether that was due to the fact that they were playing West Ham or just the fact that he's had his rest, Mourinho's trying out a few different things for next year. I don't know. We'll watch him against Sheffield United, and if he is playing up top, I think he could be a nice switch from Aubameyang because I don't really fancy Aubameyang against Wolves. I think they've got the lowest XGC in the league right now since the restart. So, I think defensively, that's why I don't know if you've got it, Adam, or you're aiming for it, but the Wolves defensive double up, Bowley and Doherty sounds like an intriguing one to me because I think their XGC is like 0.75 since the restart, and the next best is like 1.25. So I think it doesn't necessarily big at the back doesn't necessarily mean expensive at the back.
It doesn't. So I think since Bailey returned from injury, the only game they've conceded in was the Spurs away game. I think I'm right in that.
Yeah.
Which is it? I mean, they've had some tougher fixtures in there as well, which is absolutely incredible. And Villa never looked like scoring the weekend, but I think part of that is because of how well organised Wolves are. So I think there's more clean sheets to come there, and I think yeah, a double up would make sense.
The other one is probably more attacking. I know Bowley gets his set piece attack kind of potential there, but Johnnie Castro, because for that assist he was playing in the striker role. That's one of the things about Jimenez. I've noticed Jimenez does a bit of the Jesus thing where he drifts out wide sometimes. So, Johnnie could be a kind of cheap man's Doherty, but if you can have both, why not? And I guess the other team is obviously Manchester United. I wouldn't, I know he played 120 minutes and he is able to play consistently every minute, but it's hard to argue a case against having Fernandes in your team, and then you've probably got to be looking at Rashford and Martial as that triple attack there. So yeah, I mean, the one player I'd consider that's maybe not on that chart is Kane, and the one team I'd watch very closely because they are kind of under the radar, the most attacking team in the league right now is Chelsea.
Okay, so I think in terms of Man City, so I moved Foden into my team because the kind of players we've been talking about. If we're looking at people like Ings, Calvert-Lewin, maybe having Kane up front. We've just talked about having KDB, Sterling, and Mahrez, and Pulisic, and Doherty, and all. There's got to be sacrifice somewhere, right? So this is why I've gone for Foden, because I think that he's 3 million plus less than Mahrez. He's 5 or 6 million less than De Bruyne or Sterling. But I think I said this last week, and I took a bit of ridicule on the YouTube comments, where I think Foden can match those guys. And when I say match, I don't mean if KDB scores 50 points and Foden scores 40 or 45, I consider that kind of matching him because of the reduction in cost, and the upgrade you're allowing yourself elsewhere. But I think that Foden will see a lot of minutes. He looked electric in the last game when he started. What did he get? The 2 goals, the 2 assists, or the 2 goals and the assist. He came on yesterday, again in the FA Cup, just looked razor sharp. He looks really, really good. I've benched him for this week against Liverpool, but then after that, Atalanta, Newcastle, Brighton, Bournemouth, Watford, Norwich, I just can't see him not getting a lot of minutes. And people will get knocks and niggles. They're still in the FA Cup as well. So I think Foden's a good third Man City option because I think he allows you to get those players elsewhere. In terms of Man United, I think my only argument with Martial, I think, is the only one. And again, I'll probably take a bit of stick for this, but Martial is quite injury prone. And I think that I saw a stat at the start of this season to show that he hadn't started more than 3 games in a trot for something like, a year or 15 months. I probably got that stat, kind of wrong somewhere. But it was roughly something like that. And I just think, if Man United are going to keep playing these games every 3 days now until the end of the season, I just can't see with his record how he can do it. When he plays, fantastic value, incredible. But I personally, during lockdown, I brought in Rashford, Bruno, and Maguire, and I think I've been unlucky with Maguire actually because he scored last week. It was obviously chalked off for pushing the back, and then he scored yesterday as well. So I think Maguire, I think he's a really good option. So they're the 3 I've got. I would like Martial, right? Obviously, you'd be stupid to not like him, but I think he's the one at the biggest risk of maybe not playing as much as the rest.
I was actually just going to say on that, and I know it doesn't make it sound like I'm trying to back my own team here, but I did take De Bruyne out. I think you did as well, Andrew.
Yeah.
I'm just getting a fixture schedule right now. They've got the Liverpool match on the Thursday. Well, De Bruyne just played 90 yesterday. They've got Man City, Liverpool on the Thursday. I don't think Pep's going to want to be walked over there, so I would imagine De Bruyne starts. Then the games you actually want him for, this is De Bruyne or the key City assets. Southampton is 3 days later. 3 days after that, they've got Newcastle. 4 or 5 days after that, you've got Brighton, and then you start getting towards the FA Cup. So, something like an expensive De Bruyne or Jesus, if you have him, or even, Sterling's probably Sterling and Mahrez seem to be able to play a lot more minutes. do you want to run the risk of all three and not two or three of them sit on the bench and don't come in, and then you're playing your bench? So I do like the Foden shout, and he's not going to play every game, but at least that enables you to maybe have another player like a Pulisic or something else that can, rotate in and out.
But even when he doesn't play every game, more often than not, he actually comes on and gets a return. I've kind of noticed that as well. Even if he comes on with 20 to play, he'll get an assist or he'll get a goal. So it's not the end of the world. And for his price, if he does that and he allows you those kind of upgrades elsewhere, fantastic. I'm not saying, mind, that I'm not going to get De Bruyne back. The only reason I did it this week is because obviously De Bruyne had that Liverpool game, but I wanted Aubameyang. I think this Aubameyang against Norwich, I've kind of, the same as you, Andy, I think, kind of hung my hat on it as, he's
got 2 points written all over it. It's got 2 points written, or maybe even a red card, missed penalty. That's exactly what it'll be.
I don't think so. I think. So I look at this game, it's primed, right? So Norwich just played 120 minutes against Man United. They got the absolute runaround. Aubameyang completely rested. The stars are aligned. He's on penalties, and I think and also I think, which is it's probably a bit different from normal, because for me this week, everyone who owns Aubameyang captains Aubameyang, right? It's not normally you have like Salah, and there's always a toss between Salah and someone else. Usually you own the both of them, and it's a bit of a 50-50. This week, everyone who owns Aubameyang, you're not going to own Aubameyang and captain someone else. So I think this week, those Aubameyang points are actually worth double again, if that makes sense in terms of the impact it'll have on your rank, because a lot of people won't have Aubameyang at all. So if Aubameyang gets a couple of goals, if he gets 13 points, which is 26 as captain, I can't see many players having that 13 for just owning him. I think that's just like, an observation is you don't have Aubameyang this week and not captain him. I've seen very, very well. I haven't seen any teams like that, but we'll see. Just some other kind of observations. Adam's mentioned a lot of them. So the Southampton manager has come out today and said that Ings will very likely play the last 6 games to chase down the Golden Boot. Fantastic. The last 3 games, as you said, they're Brighton, Bournemouth, and Sheffield United. They do have City, Everton, and United next, which is obviously hard games. But I think Ings for that finish.
I think Ings is probably one worth discussing, actually, because I've seen 2 very good tweets with contrasting things on Ings. So obviously, big man Bacco's put on a great tweet about the XG, and I think he's got 0.85 since he's returned, versus the editor, who's then gone on and showed the types of goals Ings scores and demonstrated, because of the type, he's able to score just out the area with certain types of finishes, that he's a sort of player that will outperform his XG, and why it's not as relevant. I think with Ings, I don't think the fixtures matter. I really don't. And actually, if I was wild carding this week, Ings would 100% be in my team. I don't think there's any better value. And he's already scored. He's scored against most of the top teams this season. Southampton are good away, and after this week, they've got 3 of 4 away, which, if you look at their last 2 away performances, they've been electric. But I think the motivation of going for the Golden Boot as well is a little bit different for Salah. This is going to be Danny Ings' chance to win the Golden Boot, and I think, obviously made the decision. He left Liverpool to go to Southampton, so I think this is his moment of glory. And I think the quotes from Hassan Hutel about playing him are interesting as well. And I think looking at a lot of us at some point have been concerned about rotation or injury, but in fairness to the guy, he's got himself fit. He's dispelled the myth of being injury prone. He's been involved in absolutely every single game this season. So I think fair play to him. And I think at 7.3 million, absolute for me, he would be one of the first picks I would have from a wild card, because I'd back him to finish the season strong. You don't have to worry about rotation. So I regret not having him, but I think if it goes to plan, I'll be saving my transfer this week, and he may well be one of my 2 transfers the following week.
I'm determined to go back to our very first podcast back, I think it was October, November that we did. And we were talking about differentials, and I can't remember who it was, maybe myself and Andy or myself and Adam, but we were like, Danny Ings, he hasn't scored yet this season, but he's only like 1% owned. They got a good run of fixtures coming up. We were like, he. Look at him now going for the Golden Boot. You cannot.
We went for Tammy Abraham. I went for Tammy Abraham instead.
Yeah, incredible. I agree with Pulisic, and I think the comments from Lampard this week as well are very, very positive in terms of, he's comparing him to, he could be like the new Salah, Mane, as he matures and gets a bit older. So I think Pulisic for the rest of this season and going into next year, especially, if he's going to be playing alongside Werner, Cech, and
he was electric against City, wasn't he? Absolutely.
Is,
I mean, he was. I don't know how his second goal didn't go in. Probably one of the best clearances I've seen from Kyle Walker.
Yeah, you're right.
Absolutely.
Screenshot this moment. If Pulisic is not in my team game week 1 next season, remind me. Yeah. Remind me of this minute. I mean, he looked so dangerous. I mean, probably, we talked about Foden's impact as a sub.
Yeah.
Even if Pulisic comes on as a sub,
right.
I know
you're right.
You could just throw a brace easily.
Well, he's got that thing about him as well, where he's got the side of him where he can go past people and make something happen. Yeah. But he's also got what I'd call the XG big chance, sit 2 yards out from goal side of him, the poacher side. So I like him. I think I know a lot of people had bad experience owning him, but that was unlucky. That happens with any player. I mean, look, a lot of people have had bad experience with Danny Ings being injured. You talked about bad experiences with Martial. I think you got to move past them. And I just think if you put blockers on your bad experiences and hold grudges against players, I think it can ultimately come back and bite you.
I agree with you also with Everton's fixtures from 34 plus. So they have Southampton, Wolves, Villa, Sheffield United and Bournemouth. So a very nice finish for Everton, obviously thinking Calvert-Lewin, Richarlison, potentially even, Digne and players like that. Also West Ham have got a very nice run from game week 34. Burnley, Norwich, Watford. And then they finish it with Villa then. I don't think any West Ham players have probably yet kind of come to the fore. But, if anyone has a good game against Newcastle, and looks bright, if Haller is back and scores, for example, he's just another option.
Well, I think West Ham, where you look, so I've got Diop for 4.3 million, got 3 goals this season. The thing I've noticed about the first 2 games, even though they conceded 2 in both of them, I think they look fairly solid and how they're playing. And I back Moyes. Moyes is the sort of manager who will keep clean sheets in the easier fixtures. Yeah. I think a few have looked at maybe Fabianski as well, because he rotates excellently with the Arsenal guy Martinez. So
cool.
I think that's where you look. They look very toothless in front of goal. Don't see. Probably maybe Bowen could be an option, but
I was going to say Bowen's got that kind of exciting, slight. He's got that dribbling and that shot ability. That, I know he's very highly rated as well. So, he seems to be playing 90 minutes at the moment with the injuries. So he'd be the one I'd look at.
Arsenal's next 4, not very nice. Wolves, Leicester, Tottenham, Liverpool, but they finish up with Villa and Watford. So, potentially those last 2 games, if you're looking for a punt there won't be many people with Arsenal players, wouldn't guess, in their team. Aubameyang, maybe Nketiah, Pepe, someone like that could potentially, if Arsenal play well in these next games, they could be options there. And my last one, and we're going to move on to Liverpool now in a second, but I did notice that young Nico Williams played 16 minutes in the last game and he had 2 shots with 1 on target. So he came on for Trent. And I do wonder whether, I know he's very, very highly rated at Liverpool. I wonder whether he will get some minutes and wonder whether, because he's only 4 million, it could even worth getting him if you're keeping Trent and having Neckham on your bench, because that way you're guaranteed a Liverpool right back for the rest of the season. But I just saw those stats. I
think the substitutions is where, because the 5 subs, where it could mess up. One thing I've heard mentioned, and I think it could be a perfect time to trial it, is trialing Trent in midfield.
Yeah,
I think there's been a lot of talk, particularly for England, and I think he's a right back, isn't he? So the reality is he's not going to break in ahead of Trent. He's unlucky. He's got the world's best fullback in front of him. But what I have heard that could happen is that Trent could move further forward. And I think if he does, that would be incredible for England, I think, because I think then it gives, because we've obviously got Wan-Bissaka, we've got a few other good right backs as well. So I think that could be something to monitor. And obviously, if Trent does move further forward for next season,
he'll be 15 million next season, won't he? Right?
Well, exactly. He's captain material then, isn't he? So
the one player I want to, before we move on, the one player that's not really been mentioned, and very unlikely he would be mentioned because of the team he plays for, is Mope for Brighton. So he comes in 3rd for XG since the restart. His minutes are up there as well. He's averaging 73 odd minutes, 3 shots per game. So, I know the fixtures aren't too kind, although, I've got Norwich up next, but then they've got Liverpool, Man City after that. If you're going for form over fixtures and a player that looks like he's up for it and fired up, then Mope could be an interesting, at 5.7 million, an interesting enabler.
Well, I think actually looking at the end of the season, the person that I like from Brighton the most is Lewis Dunk, and I think if you watch Brighton play and they get a set piece, he's on the end of everything, and he just looks such a goal threat. 3 goals, 3 assists. I think for the next 3, forget it. But we talked about maybe that 3 at the end, and I think you've mentioned Mope as well, which is a good shout. But I think that's how I see it at the moment. It's almost like 2 little mini seasons. So I think Brighton probably not relevant for the next 3, but the final 3, I would look at them.
Okay. So just to touch on Liverpool, then it's very, very difficult. It's impossible to predict what they're going to do. Obviously, they've got Man City Thursday. They've then got home to Villa on the weekend. So I would imagine that people would probably be keeping their assets until that game. The fixtures do change a little bit after. Not that Liverpool, they're obviously fixture proof, but in terms of what Klopp might try to do in giving minutes to other players. Adam, what are your thoughts on what the next few weeks hold for Liverpool?
I think Klopp is a man of integrity, so I don't think he'll put a weakened side out in any of the games. When I say weakened, there might be 2 or 3 positions rotated, but I don't think he's going to put the sort of team out that played Villa in the Cup or anything like that. I think he will maybe try and win games and then bring on the youngsters. So I think he will give the likes of Curtis Jones, Elliott, Williams. I think he'll give them all game time, but I think he'll be very mindful not to put all of them in at the same time. The other thing that I do think as well is I think Mane played in the African Cup of Nations at the start of the season. It's been a long season for Mane. So I think I think he will get less minutes than Salah personally. And I think Salah, we know how greedy and goal hungry he is. The last 20 minutes versus Palace, I thought he just so direct. He just like so hungry to score. And I think if anybody can sneak the golden boot, it will be Salah. Even with Milner on the pitch, I'm almost certain he will take all penalties. I mean, take a brave man to take the ball off him. So I think Salah, and my views on Salah v Mane, I've always been in the Mane camp, but I've switched over now, and I just think he finished the season strong last season. I just think he's got that golden boot to play for, and he's got no pressure as well. That's the beauty thing. And I think playing without pressure and knowing you've won the league, smile on your face, I think having either Salah or Mane could be good. I think the one to own from a defensive point of view would be Van Dijk, because I'd expect he's played every minute of every game. I would probably expect they will continue to do that. I don't know if there'll be some. He's a bit of a romantic, isn't he, Klopp? Will he give Van Dijk every minute of every game? Possibly. So I think Van Dijk's probably the defensive option to own. I do expect Salah or Mane, Salah in particular, to finish the season strong. And I think he's a very good captaincy option for Villa at home. And if he doesn't start against Brighton, I think they've got Burnley at home. So you could have 2 incredible captain options. And I think if Salah has a home game, you're confident he's starting, there isn't a better captaincy option in the game. I mean, if you look at his points per match at home since he joined Liverpool, it's incredible. Look at his Anfield record. His away record's actually really bad. His away record this season, I think he's got two away goals this season. It's actually pretty crap, but his home record, but it is, isn't it? It's like, and I think both of those goals have come without Mane on the pitch. I think it was West Ham and Bournemouth. I think the goals came. Mane wasn't on the pitch in either of them. So I think away from home, not interested in Salah, but he's got huge potential at home, as we saw the other night. So I think the other thing, the final thing I would say on Liverpool, I haven't got FA Cup. I think Salah will play more, and will play more minutes than we probably expect.
And they're out of the Champions League as well, right? So it's
exactly.
It's not like they need to wrap him up in cotton wool for that either.
And he's incredibly fit as well. He's not. I don't think he's not. So if you look back at the last couple of seasons, he's played the majority of minutes of the majority of games, and a lot of the times they've had Champions League games. So playing every 3 days isn't a big thing for them. But the way that Liverpool will be playing. And the fixtures that they've got, maybe excluding the Man City game, but if we look at the intensity of the game so far, they've not been as intense. So I think they'll be able to, and the majority of games they'll dominate the ball, which is a lot easier position to be in than the teams that are chasing round constantly.
Cool. Andy, what are your thoughts on Liverpool?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's really only 3 assets you can consider. I think Firmino is one of these players that will naturally come off early anyway.
Yeah.
In quite a few games, and so you can see he's been averaging like 65, 75 minutes so far. So I don't really think you look at him unless you've got Origi there who can come in pretty easily for him. So you're really looking at Salah, Mane, and Trent. Obviously, will be in a lot of teams already. Robertson for the Brave, but again, he's had a few more injury concerns than Trent, so I'd imagine his minutes will be fairly curtailed. But yeah, I think Salah is definitely going to go for the Golden Boot, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him start every game and play the majority, like maybe come off with 5 or 10 minutes to go. And if he's getting close and he's starting to score, and the game's looking open, I think he'll sleep more. So the other thing to mention is they have a lot of youngsters that are highly rated, as do many clubs, but Liverpool in particular. So they've got Curtis Jones, they've got Nico Williams. You mentioned they've got not really young, but they've got Minanimo, however you say his name, I can't say it. Who is very highly rated, and of course Harvey Elliott as well. So a lot of options for them to play around with, but Salah and Trent are the ones for me. If Trent starts coming off 60 minutes or missing the odd game, I might look to move him on, but I can see them. Klopp is going to want to go for the kind of clean sheet, get as many clean sheets as possible. Was it called the Golden Glove for Alisson?
That's for Alisson, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So I've got Salah and Trent in my team, and at the moment, not going anywhere. I think if anything, they may be differentials in a few weeks because I think it's very, very easy now in the game when you're chasing points, maybe overthink it a little bit potentially. But while Liverpool are playing well, while Salah is starting, he won't be going anywhere. So I'm going to be using my Aubameyang as a cash cow next week to bump up the midfield, which means that I can keep Salah for a bit longer. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Obviously if he starts to get a rest, he starts to come off early, etc., that might change. So for our YouTube watchers, we now have a graphic up showing all defenders since the restart, priced at under 5 million. So this is for people, who are looking at wildcarding, for people potentially who are looking for the bench boost over the next few weeks as well. So this is sorted by expected points by the Hub's the stats tool. And what it shows, Adam, I hope I pronounced it right, Hauser?
Yeah, he could have scored more, and I think a lot of our set pieces are going towards him. Problem is, you're not going to get many clean sheets with our fixtures in particular.
Sure. As expected points, so he's played 4 games, and his expected points are 7.6 points per game, which is pretty impressive. He comes out top of all the players under 5 million. All the defenders under 5 million. Next is Nico Williams, as we've said, although that based on the 60 minutes he played. Seiss, I was going to mention him earlier actually, but he's still only 4.6 million. He plays every single game. He's good for bonus. He got booked on the week. Was it on the weekend just gone or the game before? He got booked and he still got a bonus point. So I think Seiss is really, really good. We obviously talk about Johnny and Doherty and Bolly and and all that, but Seiss, I've had him in my team for a few months now, and he hasn't disappointed. Then it's Bolly, then it's Dawson from Watford, Dunk at Brighton, Adam, Christensen at Chelsea. We mentioned how well Chelsea have played. He's only played 2 of the games, but he's 4.8 million. Soyuncu, Ake, Holgate, Scott Dan, Lamptey at Brighton. Obviously, he's only played the 1 game at the moment, but we're mentioning Brighton. He looks good, more for next year, I would say. But yeah, who are your picks there, Andy? You know, if you were to pick a couple of those for wildcard teams or bench boosts.
Well, I've been looking at this because I'm looking at the kind of, if you're trying to kind of go with some of the strikers and the mids we've been talking about, you need to free up some funds somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Especially with 2 Liverpool defenders in there, and Doherty, it just takes up too many funds. So basically, since the restart, the 5 best defences have been Wolves, Man United. This is in order. Wolves being the best, then Man United, Liverpool, Everton, and Bournemouth. And then Villa, surprisingly, up there as well, just in terms of XGC. So really what you're looking to do is target Wolves, Man United, Liverpool, Everton, and possibly Bournemouth. Wolves obviously stand out because they've got some great mid-price, very cheap options there, as you said, Size and Volley. So if you're looking for one of those, definitely would probably be on either, on both rather, if not one. The one player I'm surprised who hasn't played much and potentially will start to feature a bit more is Brandon Williams. Now, he'd be a lovely enabler. At what price is he now?
He's probably 4.1, is he, something like that?
Yeah, and they've obviously got a great defense. Well, probably got a great defense because the ball's not getting out of their midfield.
Yeah, that's probably right. Yeah.
More than anything, but nevertheless, they've conceded 0 big chances so far this kind of restart. So I'd be looking out for Brandon Williams to get a start, and then he's a nice option in there. And Ake as well has obviously always got a goal threat, and Bournemouth's defence seems to have improved since the restart. But for me, I'd be sticking to the Wolves boys. Look out for Brandon Williams if he starts. I know Aaron's mentioned Dunk for an attacking threat, and if you want to kind of go a bit further, maybe a Holgate or Ake. But certainly, I'd go for the teams that are looking defensive right now rather than the individual players. I know obviously everyone's got a budget, but I'd be staying well clear of Arsenal, Sheffield United, and Burnley right now because they're conceding a lot of chances right now, and Norwich, of course, conceding a lot of chances. And we've only got a few games. There's no kind of form to there's no time to be patient at this point.
Adam, any thoughts on any of those players or any others?
I think if I was looking at wildcarding for a 4th and 5th defender spot, I think Holgate's an excellent option.
Yeah,
4.3 million. I was concerned with Mina coming back. Will he miss a game? But we're going to have rotation with everybody, aren't we? So I think you've got to part that to one side. And like I said, I've put Diop in, and I think with West Ham's fixtures, I think the only way they'll win games is by keeping clean sheets. And I don't think they'll be. I don't see them scoring many. So I think Diop he looks quite a threat at set pieces as well. So they're the ones that I would look at. Obviously, you've said everything on Wolves. I don't think there's anything there. Probably another defender to mention. They did look terrible yesterday, but at Watford there's a couple of options. Kiko Femenia, I think Watford's have got coming up a couple of what you would say home bankers that they need results from, and I think they'll keep clean sheets. So I think it's Norwich and Newcastle at home coming up. So he's only 4.2 as well. So that'd be the ones that I'd look at.
Andrew's going to mention Lamptey, one of his Nketiah crew that he just is one of the future stars of FPL, right?
I keep looking at I keep looking at the moment at next year as well. I'm very excited for next season because I think we're going to see a bit of a changing of the guard in terms of some youngsters really coming through. I think the last season or two has been, if you look at the population of players, they've more or less been the same. But I think there's going to be a change. I think, for example, Pulisic. I think players like Lamptey. I think they're gonna come through and be genuine options, which is great. From a footballing view. It's also great because they're going to be very, very cheap as well. If we jump on them early, and get in them early, I think it'd be good. I think the options I would pick out there mainly said. So I've already got Sice and Holgate in my team, so I brought in them during lockdown. I think if I was going for a bit of a risk, I do think that Hauser for Villa. So he's very, very attacking. If Villa are going to stay up, they're not going to outscore teams. They're going to have to try and win 1-0 or get a 0-0 draw. So, and I also do think, after watching Villa a few times, okay, they haven't looked great going forward, but I think they've been very good at the back. very compact, and every time the ball comes in, you kind of always hear Hauser, oh, unlucky, and you think, oh, goodness, he's really, really close. So he'd be my punt, but yeah, I think Sice, Holgate, and probably Doug. You convinced me on Dunk as well earlier, Adam. Are probably the ones.
Dunk's very good for BPS as well because he's probably one for the Sky game as well. I know we're moving over to a different game, but he makes a lot of passes each match. So definitely, I think he could be one towards the end.
Did you know so far this season, House's averaged, I know small sample size again, but House's averaged 3 shots per game. Which compare that to Sterling's averaging 2.5 shots per game.
This is what I mean. Wow. His stat, he is top of the stats. So even though he's scored a goal, haven't he? So his actual points per game is 4. His expected points per game is 7.6. And bear in mind they conceded a couple of them as well. So he's looking very, very attacking. And all his shots have been in the box as well. So he's not just like having a long range punt from 40 yards either, right? So he's one of those. He could be like 2 point, 1 point, 12 or 15 points. I think he's that kind of player. So he'd be my punt.
And we haven't mentioned. This is a podcast. We haven't mentioned Nketiah yet.
We haven't mentioned Nketiah. So I think it's because of Arsenal's fixtures. So I think after this week, their fixtures are not nice. I was tempted to go for a double up this week with Aubameyang and Nketiah, but I went for Aubameyang because it suited structure of my team bet. I'm always a bit of a sucker for penalties as well. I just think that penalty thing it's bailed me out in the past. Like when your striker doesn't have a good game, it's happened a lot with Kane. Like Kane will have a really, really quiet game, and all of a sudden Spurs will get a penalty. He'll score the penalty and he'll mop up the bonus points. But I also think Aubameyang, it's kind of written in the stars, right? Arsenal will get a penalty on Wednesday, and if you remember a couple of years ago when Lacazette was struggling for form, Aubameyang gave the penalty to Lacazette. I do wonder whether if they get a penalty against Norwich, he'll step up, grab the ball, and give it to Nketiah and give him a tap on the head and go, "Go on, you take the penalty," and all the Aubameyang owners will be like, "What are you doing?" But we'll see. We'll see about that.
I don't see that at all.
I'm hoping not. It would be horrific. But he's on 17 goals, I think, as well. So he's only 2 off the Golden Boot. So again,
he won't. He'll be focused on the Golden Boot. I see what you mean on penalties. I've never really put too much focus on it. But then when I had that brilliant bench boost not too long ago, I had Mahrez, De Bruyne, and Fernandes all score penalties for me. So there you go.
This is it. You don't need to be playing well to score a penalty, right? You don't need to be, flying on the box to score a penalty. So okay, so on to the next part. It's been a long old episode, but hopefully it's been incredibly useful for our listeners and watchers. And this is the best time to use the remainder of the chips. So obviously, now we're moving into 33. There's only 6 game weeks left. So Adam, when is the best time for us to be thinking about using the remainder of our chips?
I'll be honest, I don't think there is, because we've only got single game weeks. I think it is a team by team strategy. And I think where it could work well, where I could see, let's say for argument's sake, you've got your free hit left. What will happen? There's a lot of talk about rotation. Games come in every 3-4 days. So if we have got a reasonable idea about who will be the Man City players starting the next game, then I think that could be the time to use the free hit. Let's say Foden, Sterling and Mahrez are benched for a game, and then they've got Newcastle at home next. That could be, I think having a set time to use it, I think you're better off having the flexibility and thinking, when looking at each game week, is there an opportunity for me to do something based on the knowledge that I've got? So I think for me it varies team by team. I think bench boost, I think if you've got a wild card left, I would probably play it the week after and think just for certainty. But I think there's plenty of 4 to 5 million players that you could have on the bench. Nketiah, Foden. There's enough defenders as we've talked through. So I think you could get a decent bench boost score in a lot of weeks. I think the week that's coming up now, there's some nice fixtures. Let's talk about playing a free hit the last game of the season. I'm actually against that. And the reason I'm against it is FPL is about trying to predict stuff. the 2 game weeks I would find the most difficult to predict are the first and last. There's often some freak results. So if you look back at, there can be some really high scoring games, but you've got to pick the games, and you've got to pick it. It can be such a lottery, that last game of the season. And actually, if you plan your transfers well, you should be able to, you might be able to get, I think City have got Norwich, haven't they? So I think targeted having 3 City, but I think a lot of people will when it comes to that anyway. So for me, I think it just purely depends on your team. I think there's loads of triple captain opportunities as well. I think this weekend's quite a good one. So I think Man United have got Bournemouth. Salah's facing Villa. I think they're as good a fixtures. You might want to save that for the last day of the season if you've got a guaranteed Man City starter versus Norwich.
And Chelsea home to Watford as well, who obviously have been struggling as well. So you got your Pulisic or whatever else.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that there's plenty of options, but I don't think normally where there's double game weeks thrown in and blank game weeks, there tends to be 1 or 2 popular options. For me now, it's just depends on your team, and I think looking at it week by week, is there an opportunity for me to take advantage over other people? If your team looks set up well for the next week, don't play it. But I think it's hard to look too far ahead because there'll be injuries, there'll be other things that will happen that will probably change your plans.
I think that's my point exactly, which I want to make. So I've got bench boost left, and as it happens now, going into 33, I think the fixtures are really nice for this one. I think I kind of planned up my team from the restart with this in mind. I think I've been quite fortunate at this point that all my players are still fit. I think we're getting to a point now, as we've mentioned already, that a lot of teams now are going to have a game every 3 or 4 days. And I think that a lot of teams have now played 3 or 4 games in 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks. And I think that has been sustainable. I personally don't think that is sustainable for another 4 weeks. I just don't think that people are going to play 8, 9, 10 games in 4 or 5 weeks. So I think now is the time that we may start seeing a bit of rotation. We may start seeing the injury and fatigue to catch up with players as well. So I think my advice would be to play them as soon as you can while your team is in a fit shape. Because as you've mentioned, there's no doubles to hang on for at all, right? And what you don't want to do. So let's have a look at game week 36, which is another really good option fixture-wise, right? So Man City home to Bournemouth, Man United have got Palace, Everton have got Villa, Chelsea have got Norwich, just as an example, right? So that looks a really good point there to maybe, play your, wild card into that, play your bench boost. But if by the time you get there, 4 or 5 of your players are injured, they're being rotated or whatever else, you screwed your team up. I think from a free hit view, I think a free hit is different. I think that's a real kind of luxury at the moment. But even if you play your free hit, you're still not guaranteed knowing who's going to play, who's been injured the training before, all this kind of stuff. So my advice would be, don't try and overthink it. I'm playing my bench boost this weekend. It's probably not the optimum time I could have played it through the season. But I'm just looking at next week and the week after and thinking, these players just can't keep playing every single game. They're going to be rotated at some point. So
I think the week to avoid any free hit or chips would probably be game week 37 with the FA Cup semi-finals. Yeah. I think it's been a nightmare having the game week deadline prior to the FA Cup matches, because we'd have probably all made different decisions. I think Aubameyang would have been even more popular if we knew what we knew now. I think Pulisic wouldn't have been as popular. Fernandes probably wouldn't have been as popular. So I think learning from that, game week 37 for me, I would avoid playing a chip.
And I think
I still do like the free hit on the last game of the season, simply because it is unpredictable. But you can, in theory, we're going to get a lot of team news. So if I still had it, I'd probably.
Why would you get the team news, Andy?
Just simply because the deadline is that. The deadline is 2 p.m. right for the FPL, and then we normally see some leaks for some teams. So I'm thinking that particularly for the main teams, we might get some team news leaks. So that might enable you to maximize your free hit team, if you like. Whereas right now,
I see it from when I take part in Footstock. It's almost like a guess when you're trying to pick which Chelsea team is going to play, or is De Bruyne going to get his second 90 minutes in a row, or is he going to be on the bench? And who's playing up front. So if I've got a free hit team, I want to make it as guaranteed to be starting as possible.
I think we're relying. I think the only problem with that is you're relying on team leaks being accurate, and I think unless Rockstar is on form, I think there's a lot of pressure on him to put enough, that many lineups out. And I don't know. I just think I think you might get one or two snippets of information. A few seasons back, we heard about Josh King, but I think overall, I don't think we'll get as much, and it'll be quite panicked. 5-2. Is Rockstar going to tweet? Is he going to leave it as late?
Because he only gets the team news 15 minutes before, right? And the kind of tweets he puts out and stuff, he's got to make sure they're right. And he puts in a fair bit of depth as well. So I personally don't think it's worth waiting all that time just for maybe one or two snippets of team news when you've got all these kind of other better opportunities, in my opinion. But each to their own, and I also think that Rockstar is the only in the know who we can trust as well. Can you imagine what the fake team news is going to be like during that hour from what we've seen this last month? It's been absolute chaos.
There's another guy, this Sammy Martin guy, who's quite good on Leicester, but they're obviously playing against Manchester United. So
it's not
the best fixture for the team news.
Okay, we've got time for a few questions. So hopefully we've answered the vast majority of the questions that we had earlier. We've got a few left. FPL Theory, well, he's already asking the question that we've answered. Question for the show for those only with a bench boost left. Save for 38 plus madness or play in 35. She's looking at 35. I'm playing mine in 33. Steve, I wouldn't play in 38. I think we've kind of answered that already. Question from @LazFPL. Since the restart, these players have been popular shouts as low mid-price midfielders. We've talked about Sarr, Barnes, Grealish, McGinn, Mount and Fleck. However, they've all failed to hit the ground running. Who are similar price replacements we can consider for the final 4 or 5 game weeks of the season? So who in that kind of mid-price midfielder bracket?
There's a few. So mention Pulisic just a little bit more if you've got the budget.
6.9, I think.
Yeah, you got Foden. I think looks very good. But outside of that, I think Southampton have looked good. So you got Ward-Prowse. I mean, he looked Armstrong. Yeah, I think Ward-Prowse is the more nailed. Armstrong's a little bit more risky. So I think you got some. I think there are some okay options there. But I would probably look to Pulisic or Foden personally.
You got my man Traore, 5.8 million.
Traore,
very dangerous. We know he's not going to play every game. And the other very, very cheap enabler, I think we mentioned it last week, who Arteta seems to love him, is Saka.
Yeah, it's a good shot.
Very dangerous.
4.7, I think.
Now. Yeah. It's been unlucky not to return the last game. He did get the assist against Brighton, but he looks very impressive.
Yeah, I agree.
My issue with Traore is I think he's a 1 pointer waiting to happen. I just think he tends to just get an assist. Very rarely gets bonus. He needs two returns to get more than 5 points. That's what and so for me, I think Wolves defence and Jimenez are just better Wolves options. I'd rather double up on the defence. I think Bowley at 4.8 is a better option than Traore. So I'd rather go with an extra defender than Traore. But
and you haven't mentioned your man Grealish. He's only 6.2 mil.
I think he was. They were saying about
Grealish. Yeah, he said.
Yeah, he was saying about him disappointing.
Yeah. I think he could do pretty well.
I think it depends on what happens. If Villa are going into the final 2 or 3 game weeks with some hope, it could be written. The fairy tale is he keeps us up and before he goes. But I'm not too convinced that's going to happen at the moment.
I'm not sure how much Lo Celso is, and I'm probably looking again for a little bit more for next season. But just to say that I think he's a fantastic player, and I'm hoping to see a lot more before the end of the season. He's probably a bit more expensive, I guess, but
he passes the eye test. But for me, he's more of a. I know at previous clubs his goals and assists record was a lot better. But I think he's probably going to be more of the assist assist the assister.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. But in terms of a player, he looks very good, and I think he could be a very big player for Spurs next year.
And St. Maximum as well looks very, very sharp. How Gale didn't score that goal against Man City yesterday, all that brilliant work by St. Maximum. He's got a turn on him. He's got a turn of foot, pace again next season. I keep going about next season, but St. Maximum is going to be a bit of a player, I think. Question from at FPL Kaza. So we've talked about cheap defenders for those on Wildcard. Best goalkeeper for those on Wildcard. He asks, is Pope worth the 0.7 million over Martinez? So Adam, you've got Martinez, haven't you? Are you glad you got him?
Well, I think that's the one sacrifice I made on Wildcard was he was my set and forget. I think Arsenal defensively, since Arteta have come in, minus a few hiccups, they do seem to have improved. And I think would I be asking the same question if Leno was in goal? Would I think if Leno was set and forget, maybe I'd have a bit more confidence? But I think 4.2, he's played all right since he's come in, I think.
Good saves,
so, and I think he could be good for bonus because one thing that's quite good about him, he passes it out from the back quite a bit. And I'm pretty sure on BPS, if a goalkeeper makes over 30, or if any defender player makes over 30 passes and has over 70% pass completion, that's brilliant for bonus as well. So I think he could be. I think he made against Sheffield United, made like 40 odd passes yesterday. So I think he could. I think he's good. It's horrible not owning Pope because he just seems to. He's the one player I hate not owning because he just seems to, just loads of jam about his points. I just don't. Yeah, maybe I'm coming across very salty, but yeah.
How Watford didn't score last week was incredible. I watched the highlights and Watford bombarded them and they just couldn't score, could they?
I do. I think. I looked at it. I think Pope will outscore. But then again, if I look at Arsenal's fixtures, there could be a few surprise clean sheets. They've got two good ones at the end. They've got Norwich. They could keep a clean sheet at Wolves. That Wolves game could be 0-0. I mean, Wolves didn't look great against Villa, I didn't think. They didn't create any, the best chance they had was when our keeper threw it to them. Yeah. So Leicester, they've got at home, that you could keep a clean sheet there. So I think what I would say about him is he's incredible value and he should get the rest of the games this season.
Andy, best cheap goalkeeper or best goalkeeper for Wildcard, what would you say at the moment?
Well, I mean, Pope's kept a clean sheet at half-time in the Burnley match. We all had him at one point in the season, and we thought, right, he's our keeper for the season, and we all took him out. Anyway, lessons for next year. So, yeah, I know they've had a troubled spell, but I really can't look past a fully kind of fit, regular starting, very little rotation Sheffield United team. I know that they have had their wobbles. They've got some tough fit. They've got Spurs up, then they've got Wolves and Chelsea coming up as well. So, potentially you want a rotation there. I haven't really looked at the rotation options myself, but yeah, I still like Henderson as an option there, and potentially with Martinez because Martinez at that price is quite. You can have him as a cheap keeper at 4.3, and then have a slightly more expensive one. That's what I would aim for.
Okay. Question again from at FPL Theory. Can somebody give some lessons in how to pronounce? I'm not going to say his name because I pronounce it wrong all the time. The Wolves. Oh, what was that?
Doherty, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
No, the problem is whenever you say it, you sound Irish, so it sounds like you're trying to fake an Irish accent.
Andy, what about you? Are you going to have a go?
I think it's Doherty. But then that sounds like I'm trying to put on an Irish accent, but I'm not.
It's Doherty, I think. It's got to be Doherty.
Doherty.
I think if you say
Doherty,
then it's wrong. You've got to say Doherty.
Doherty.
Doherty. It could be Doherty, actually. Maybe.
The problem, I think, with Adam and I in particular is we've got quite regional accents, I think, don't we? So
that's nicely put, regional. Like that.
Well, let's get Ferry on. Let's get Ferry on, and he can tell us how to.
Yeah, but I agree in terms of the faking, sounding Irish. It's like, I'm like, we'll have Johnny Otto on the left-hand side, and then we'll have Doherty on the right-hand side. It doesn't sound right, does it? At Rich Clark FPL. So final question. Do you think there is merit in holding a remaining wildcard until the last few weeks, given playing it in 33 plus might only mean making a few transfers away from an already good team? Really good question there from Rich. If your team is looking all right now, is it worth just using the wild card just because it seems the time is right, or is it worth holding on to later in the season? Andy, what are your thoughts?
Really, the only reason I would use it now, and I think it is probably a good time to use it now, he's been very patient to hold on to it, is that Man City's fixtures turn better.
Yeah.
As in after the Liverpool game, they've now got Southampton, Newcastle, Brighton, Bournemouth, Watford, Norwich. Doesn't get much better than that, really, with the exception of Villa potentially. But I think, and that is the team, as I mentioned earlier, you really want to be targeting Man City and what's I said? Manchester United, Wolves, and City and Chelsea. So, from an attacking perspective, they're one of the teams which has a fixture turn, a lot of exciting players. Yes, there'll be rotation, but you can cope with that. If you've got the wild card, it's perfect because you can either have the big hitters or the Fodens, and you can have a great bench to be able to come on if one of them doesn't play.
And also, so like even though now, if you've got a half decent team, but you still score 20 or 30 points less than you would have, off your wild card, you're always playing kind of catch up then week on week, aren't you? So I think
I'm looking at Rich's team actually. So he's just a little bit behind me in the Hub Contributors League. So I would say categorically burn the wild card. You don't need it for the rest of the season.
Is it fully stacked?
I think the looking at his team, I think it's nicely set up for the next few game weeks. So what I would probably do is I think maybe 35 or 36 fixtures turn for some of the other teams, likes of Everton, Southampton. I think at the moment I wouldn't use his wild card this week because I'm just looking at his team. He's got Salah, Pulisic, Fernandes, De Bruyne in midfield. Pretty strong. I think he could make one transfer and have like a really, really strong setup. So I don't think it would be worthwhile doing it this week. So I think he should hold off a week or two. But his team's looking, considering he hasn't used his second wild card, his team's looking very strong.
I think Andy and I are saying use it, burn it, get your team set up, go and really attack these next few fixtures. But Adam's advice is you can make it through a couple of game weeks and change it to 35.
I think that one advantage, if he holds it a week, is that City play Southampton and 3 days later they've got Newcastle at home. I would probably prefer the City players versus Newcastle. And you should have a bit of an idea who's going to start that game. So I think that's one plus to doing it.
I just looked at his team actually. I think in his starting 11, he's got probably 9 or 10 of the 11 players that we've already talked about at length. So that just shows you how strong his team is.
Yeah, well, I definitely wouldn't wild card this week with his team.
And
he's got Pope in goal as well.
Yeah, he's got a great tone. He's got Aubameyang captain.
I was talking to Rich this week, and he said that he listened to our podcast that we did on the weekend, and off the back of the podcast, it persuaded him to put an Aubameyang and captain him. So it's our fault. Whatever happens, guys. Okay, so that is it. A very long podcast this week, but hopefully it's helped everyone really have a think about their strategy and their plans for the remaining 6 game weeks of the season. Andy, where can people get hold of you?
On Twitter, FPL Fantasy Guide.
And yourself, Adam?
Hopcroft 13 on Twitter.
And thank you so much, guys, for your time. So really good insight and information there. My Twitter handle is @Fergie222. So this video recording will be on the Fantasy Football Hub YouTube channel, with the podcast versions available in all major podcast libraries. If you liked what you watched, please press the like button and remember to subscribe to the channel in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. And if you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast and leave a comment. It helps us increase our rankings, listens and watches, and allows us to continue to improve the production of our work. It also makes sure you don't miss anything. It also enters you into a random draw at the end of the season to win a free annual premium hub membership, so it is very well worth doing. Our handles on Twitter, Instagram and TikTok are @FFH_HQ, and our podcast Twitter handle is @FFH_podcast. So please follow and feel free to ask us any questions at any time. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, where you will find everything you need for fantasy football all under one roof, including player comparison tools, the fixture ticker, the stats, top player team reveals, and much, much more. If you fancy a free 7-day trial, either click on the link in the description, click on the link appearing now above my head, or go to the website and click on the bright red free trial button. We'll be bringing you the live Sky Fantasy podcast on Sunday evening at 9 p.m. And this Wednesday evening, in 2 days' time, we will again bring you FPL Wednesday Live as we live stream to provide FPL commentary for the 3 6 p.m. games from this channel. So join us from 10 to 6 for that. In the meantime, we hope you have a good remainder of Game Week 32 plus, a good start to Game Week 33 plus, and we'll be back before the Game Week 34 plus midweek deadline next week to help you make those all-important decisions. Don't miss it. Good night all.